So, welcome to this new project, more or less. Well, you might have seen the car in a few previous videos wherein I installed the catalytic converter or where I showed off the car. But now, as the car also has passed inspections now, we want to get further into this because I have now converted this car to Speeduino. The reason why I did not show specifically the installation, etc. is because, well, it was the first time not using a plug-and-play unit for me. I'm going to explain how I did it, but I'm not going to show you the full process. But I'm going to show and link to everything you need to, well, basically also convert your 4AGE silvertop to a standalone ECU. First of all, what is this car and what's the project going to be about? Well, it is a Toyota Carina ST170, basically the same as a Corolla E90. Came originally with a 4AFE engine, which I also have one of here, but I tend to, or I'd rather stay with the 4AGE 20V. And it was, or has been swapped with a 4AGE 20V silvertop. So basically the initial D engine. What is the plan with that now? Well, I want to turbo the thing because I'm not really that much of a NA guy. I have tried open throttle bodies now, which you will also hear some clips later in the video, but I'm just not a fan of it, and it's not as emotional for me as a turbo setup. So what's the plan? The plan is about getting the car to run on a kind of budget turbo setup that's gonna make about 250 horsepower. So that it's fun and still kind of dailyable. And so that I do not have to open the engine. Though there probably is going to be an engine rebuild in soon because the engine is kind of burning some oil, so probably gonna do that also sometime sooner or later. First steps though, well, we installed the Speeduino to run basically bigger injectors, run without the AFM and run a turbo setup. That's basically the reason why we did that. For the Speeduino we used a DIY EFI unit. So basically a custom or universal ECU that we also used a harness adapter. This is like a Denso plug adapter, which you do not need to use, only if you want to retain the factory plug and do not want to snip the cables and resolder the complete harness. Although this is totally doable as there isn't really that much risk and you don't probably want to return to the original ECU anyway. And also you have less connections then, so this might be a better way to go. I'm going to show you a diagram on which wires I put to where. So you can, for example, run this engine with the stock distributor, and so the stock distributor crank and cam signal. And in addition to that, the stock distributor firing, so the ignition. This would be when you only use one ignition output, and then that would work fine. I used a coil-on plug setup, so I used sequential ignition, which makes the car better suited for boost. The only issue then is that you have to figure out a way to get your tachometer working again, or so, because the tachometer is linked to the igniter, the stock one, and that gives out a signal to the tachometer, and if you do not have that igniter, you don't get a tachometer signal anymore. So yeah, that's something I gotta figure out as well. And this plan or this wiring diagram I show you is only like for the minimal setup. So you basically need coolant temperature to get the car running right when it's cold and running right when it's hot. And the other things are just crank and cam sensors, as well as ground connections for any sensors or whatever, and then ignition and spark. That's basically everything you need to get the car at least running. You don't really necessarily need TPS even, although I would highly recommend it, as some features are not available when you don't use TPS. So you might want to look into that, because I did not get mine working on my car because I think the sensor is kind of broken, so I have just left that out for now. But it works fine like this, You might have to work around some stuff, but yeah. For the tuning part, I have a whole Speeduino tuning series, so if you want to know how to tune your engine, or especially your 4AGE engine, look at that series. If you have a blacktop, for example, there's already a plug-and-play unit for about 420 euros or dollars. Yeah, then it's even easier. The only thing you have to look out for is when you get a Speeduino, also get the dual VR conditioners, because the 4AGE 20V uses VR sensors instead of Hall effect sensors as on some other cars. So you need that module to get the car running. I also bought a AFR gauge to monitor my air-fuel ratio, which you definitely need when running a standalone ECU, because otherwise you cannot really tune it. And I also bought a timing light to check timing. And the last thing is I built myself some dead cans to tune my ignition timing. But everything starting after the installation to tuning the car, etc., I show in the series about how to tune your Speeduino ECU. And that's basically the part for installing the Speeduino. I'm gonna show you some scenes where I drive the car and how it's driving, etc. And then basically in the next part I will show you the parts we are probably going to install. I'm still waiting on some fuel injectors. I already have basically almost everything else. And yeah, then in the next part we're probably gonna look at some nice new shiny parts, or also some used parts, but mostly new and shiny. Until then, see you next time. I wish you a nice day and goodbye.